What is up, everybody? My name is James Blissett, professional gambler and founder of Lucrative MMA, which is my handicapping service where I help people make money from betting on MMA. And today, we're going to be speaking about the UFC 290 card that has just been probably the best ever card I've watched. I don't know if it's recency biased. We speak about that a lot in MMA betting. We don't speak about it too much in MMA recapping, but maybe it's recency bias. I don't know, man. But I was watching that fight card on Sunday out here, actually, in Auckland, New Zealand. And it's like every fight just shocked me. Every fight either shocked me or was just an absolute war or banger. Luckily, even though a lot of fights shocked me, we still made it out with profit, which is always the goal here. We're gamblers at the end of the day. But just as a pure fan perspective, it had been a while since I was really looking forward to a card. And I hadn't felt that looking forward feeling for a long time. I remember I woke up in the morning or the night before and I was like, you know what, I can't wait for this card tomorrow. And I haven't felt like that in a long time. I can't even remember the last time I have felt like that. I don't think I felt like that this year. So I felt like that and it really lived up to the hype. It was an amazing card. We're going to break it down. Maybe not the whole card, but we'll break down the most important talking points with my guest, who I'll bring in right now. And then we'll also have a little early look ahead to the upcoming UFC card on this Saturday, which is Holm versus Buena Silva. I haven't done too much tape. I'm not sure if my guest has done too much tape, but we will have a little skim over it, look over the odds, and see if we can find any value in the odds that are out at the moment, or at least give you our opinions on those fights. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in my man. I went live on his podcast last week, so he's returning the favor. Liam Picks Fights. You probably all know him. Liam, what is up, my brother?
James, what's going on, man? Had a pretty good week last week. We took some grief in the comments section, right? But the unanimous panel came through when it mattered most. So very exciting night of fights, like you mentioned. I thought it was a very good UFC card. I don't know if I'd put it right up there with my favorite of all time, because the one thing is I felt like it built and built and built, and then it was a little bit anticlimactic in the main event. Yair started to get a little bit of a head of steam, then it all fell apart. So it all just felt like a little bit of like that ending note maybe wasn't there. But as far as the card overall, I mean, what more could you ask for? Fun finishes, great fights. Everybody brought it from the first prelim all the way on down. So it was an excellent night of fights.
Yeah, I agree. That is a good point in regards to the main event. The main event was not as exciting as I thought it could be. I honestly gave Yair a better chance than he showed in that fight. But Volkanovski proves again why he's one of the best in the world, probably the best in the world right now, in my opinion. I was happy to see the UFC keep Volkanovski at pound for pound number one. Pound for pound is a very silly argument at times, right? Because how can you compare someone like Volkanovski to someone like John Jones? I mean, it's basically saying if Volkanovski had 100 more pounds on him, he would beat John Jones. I mean, it doesn't really make sense, right? But I was happy that they kept him pound for pound number one after the Islam Makhachev fight, because that's what I think pound for pound is. It's going up in weight, moving up in weight. And Volkanovski, in my opinion, is still the best fighter in the world, even though he lost against Islam Makhachev there. And we can get straight into that fight, man, because, I mean, I didn't expect Volkanovski to dominate from start to finish. I did think that he'd have to come through some adversity, whether it was hard body shots. And he did at times. I think mainly in the third round, which is actually the round that he got the finish in, it was looking a bit shaky at times on the feet, which is what I kind of felt like the fight would play out to be, but Volkanovski still will get the ground and pound finish. I predicted Volkanovski to get a ground and pound finish in round 3, and he did get a ground and pound finish in round 3, but the dynamic of the fight, it was more of a domination of for Volkanovski than I thought it would be. How did you see that fight playing out? I know we spoke about it last week, but did you think Yair didn't show up his best, or did you expect the fight to go the way it did?
I think it's probably a combination of both. Was that the best version of Yair? I'm not totally convinced. I felt like he was a little bit flat, but I also feel like, when you're fighting the best guy, it's a really hard thing to show up looking your best. I feel like he tried his best. I feel like he tried to get back into the fight. He started a little slow though, and you really don't want to let Volk get a couple beats on you, right? Think about the Max Holloway 2 fight, right? Where he was down in that fight, arguably 2 clear rounds. And then the third round, he comes back just enough to make it close. He changes the game plan, starts wrestling, right? And then he comes back in rounds 4 and 5. We know that Volk, like Piotr Jan, like some of these other guys, can build into fights. And when you watched how he performed this time, he just came out and shut him out of the fight from very early on. He went for takedowns. I picked Yair here by 5th round knockout. And honestly, I'm always going to take shots like that, right? I'm just a person that I like underdog stories. I look for the kind of opportunities, and I fade champions when I think they could be on their way out. And we mentioned before the fight some of our reasons, right? He's coming down in weight really quickly, making a fast turnaround after a brutal Islam Makhachev fight. And how does he show up looking? The best he ever has. He absolutely puts a beat down on Yair, takes him down at will every time he wanted to. And I thought he had some clear advantages there. But we've also seen, kind of like in round 3, Volk has an ego. Volk's a guy that likes to go out there and show that he's the best guy. And when you see how he went out there and pursued the finish there, I feel like he just wanted to make a statement in this fight. He came in with an extreme level of preparation. He wanted to earn that fight back with Islam Makhachev. And I did mention in my handicap, that's why I didn't go so hard on the Yair bet either, right? It was a half a unit shot for me because I felt like the one capping point that I like to have against a long-reigning champion is they've lost their motivation. And he had clear motivation here to come back and get that Islam Makhachev rematch, So for me, that's where Yair, he could have came with his very best stuff, and I don't think he could have beaten this version of Volkanovski on the night. He was not going to be denied. He brought his best stuff to the table, and I've been saying for years he's the best fighter in the game, but at 34, when you're making hard weight cuts, when you're moving back and forth in class, it's very hard to look good. He just did it anyway, so God bless him for it. He did it at a big price tag. He justified it. What more could you say?
And I was the same as you. I took a half a unit shot on Yair Rodriguez at plus 300. And I also took a half a unit shot at Dricus du Plessis at plus 300. I think we both did the exact same thing because I saw your Better Made Up Tips record earlier today. And I just thought like one of these lines are off. Maybe both of these lines are off. If I play both of them, I'm pretty confident. I mean, it's hard to say confident on plus 300s, but I was definitely confident I was getting value in some regard. And it turned out I was right. So we made both of those bets and we came out heavily profitable over both of those bets because we bet massive underdogs, right? So that's what you have to understand. We went 1-1, me and Liam, on those money line bets, and we came out heavily profitable, right? Our ROI was over 100%, even though we went 1-1. Now, if you're laying chalk, right, and this is the people who gamble and they like to bet favorites a lot of the time, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just your margin of error is a lot less. So if you lay chalk and you go 1-1, let's say you bet Jalen Turner and you also bet Alexander Volkanovski. Or, you went 1-1, but you lost money. Whereas me and Liam, we went 1-1 and we won money. So betting underdogs can be a very useful thing in MMA, especially because the fights are so volatile all the time. I mean, Yair Rodriguez via KO in round 5, even though that would have been an insane outcome, it's not like we haven't seen it before. We've seen insane outcomes before, right? I feel like this sport is probably, I mean, I don't focus on too many other sports, but I really think that MMA has some of the craziest dramatic moments of all time. And that's because one singular thing can completely change the dynamic of the event. And you don't get that a lot in other sports, right? So you might be a little bit more versed in other sports. I know you're an American. I know you're American. The Americans love their sports, right? Most Americans I know, they like baseball, they like basketball, they like all of that sort of stuff. But if you're playing a basketball match and you hit one hoop, one 3-pointer, it's probably not going to dramatically change the dynamic of the event. But if you're Alexander Volkanovski and you're destroying Yair Rodriguez, then you get caught with a flying knee. Or if you're Jalen Turner and you're beating up Dan Hooker and then you just gas out, one shot, one thing completely changes the dynamic of fights. That's why you have to be very careful when you're laying big chalk, laying chalk in general, but definitely big chalk. So, yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty common knowledge, right? So it's not really arguable, but I like to ask your opinion. I don't know if you like many other sports. I'm pretty sure I've heard you speak about a couple of other sports, but would you go along with that MMA is up there, top 2, top 3, maybe top 1 sports where a singular moment changes the entire event? And I'd like to ask you if there are any other sports you know of that happen as well, other than boxing or other combat sports. Because I'm actually interested myself.
See, I've always been drawn to combat sports for that very reason, James. It's the air of finality, right? Where if I'm watching a a football game, if I'm watching a baseball game, right, especially at a lower level, there's rules like mercy rules, right? If I'm up by 15 or something, we'll stop it. But like when you just watch most normal sports, there's a time limit, right? There's a set amount of time. This is how long we're going to do this for. And so, if I want to run to the bathroom, I'm like, yeah, I'll catch the last 5 minutes, right? What matters in a game? The last 5 minutes. If it's basketball, right? What are we even watching for? It's the first quarter, right? Let's go get a hot dog from the concession stand, right? Like, what is even the point until the very end when the game is decided? To your point, in a fight, I could be fighting perfectly. Think about all the times that we've seen somebody doing very well, Kyoji Horiguchi against Sergio Pettis, and then it's all over in an instant. And if you looked away, you missed it. It commands your attention. And for me, that's the thing that's beautiful about fight sports, but it's also the thing for me about wrestling that I loved, right? At any point, I could be down 14-0. I put you to your back. It's all over. You got to stay perfect. And I always had a kill switch. That's what I felt like. I always had a way to put you down and finish the match. That is hope, right? And like, you could be down by 40 in a game and just look up at the time and go, we don't have enough time to do anything here. But you could always get the win in combat sports if you still believe. Alex Pereira against Izzy, chasing him down in the 5th round, says, come here, young man. I don't care about what the scorecards say. I'm taking that belt. Leon Edwards, how many examples where it doesn't matter what the scorecards say. You got to be perfect for 5 rounds, and that's what makes a champion.
Yeah, 100% right, man. So I think we're on agreement there. And that's definitely one of the big things that draw people to combat sports, I think. Even if they don't intellectualize it, that is a lot of the reason why people like combat sports. It's because it can just change in an instant, man. And unfortunately, Yair has done it before, in the 5th round against Korean Zombie. He couldn't do it this weekend, but that's because he was going up against one of the greatest of all time, man. Would you like to see Volkanovski fight Makhachev again in the rematch, or do you want to see that Topuria fight? Because obviously the UFC may be leaning that Topuria side just because they did have a little face-off after, and I think the UFC probably had something to do with that face-off. I didn't see how it actually happened, but I mean, he was front row for a reason. He probably had access to cage side for a reason. So there's 2 great fights there. I mean, just my personal opinion, I want to see the Topuria fight. It's new. We haven't seen it before. I love Volkanovski. I love him. He is my favorite fighter. I've been saying it for years. I remember me and you speaking about Volkanovski against Korean Zombie. This was about a year ago now. And we said this guy's the best fighter in the world. And at this point, people weren't having it. I think after the Makhachev fight, people started to understand, right? Or even after the Zombie fight, when he finished him, a lot of people changed. But I've been speaking about Volkanovski for many years. I was saying he's one of the best fighters in the sport for years. And so I want to see him get that rematch, of course, because it's the only fight he's lost in the UFC. It's a fight where he could have won it with different margins, in my opinion. I mean, even in that 4th round, I don't know if you remember or if you've heard Volk speak about it, but Volk's too calm in there. I mean, he's even too calm, which is extremely rare in MMA. I mean, amateur MMA, professional MMA, doesn't matter what it is. If anybody's fighting MMA, you're going to be too nervous. You're not going to be too calm, right? The 1% of the 1% are too calm, but there is such thing as too calm. And Volkanovski in that 4th round, he's smiling, he's laughing. He just takes his foot off the gas and Islam jumps on his back and wins the whole round just from jumping on his back. And Volk said, I lost focus there. And Eugene Behrman out of City Kickboxing, he told Volk as well, he's like, look, you lost focus there, man. You need to stay on the ball. So I do think that is a winnable fight for Volk with some minor adjustments, whereas I don't really think Makhachev can adjust that much in that fight. So for that reason, I do want to see Volk get double gold, but being 100% honest, that Topuria fight, I think, is calling my name at the moment. It's new blood. We haven't seen it before. It's 145 where Volk is best, where he's proven. And Topuria poses probably the hardest challenge in the entire division I've seen for a while, even prior to the Yair Rodriguez fight, because Topuria doesn't really have holes in his game. Maybe his cardio isn't great. We don't really know. I know you can say what you say about Emmett, but Emmett was the nail for 25 minutes out of 25 minutes. I don't know how his cardio holds up. There is some questions on the Topuria side. Of course, he's young, 25 years old, undefeated, hasn't come through major adversity, really. I know maybe the head kick against Jai Herbert, but you know what I'm saying. So although there are some question marks, I still think he poses the best threat against Volkanovski. So I want to see the Topuria fight. What about you? Do you want to see him get the chance against Makhachev, or would you like the Ilya fight?
Honestly, I think that the Ilya fight makes more sense for the company because Charles just got the big win. There's not really another clear lightweight contender in my view. So I feel like they would probably want to do the Charles rematch with Islam. That could also create a chance, not a likelihood, but a chance for a new matchup at lightweight as well. If Charles was to win there, I mean, that would probably go to a trilogy right away. But also that therein lies Volk's chance to slide up and fight Charles Oliveira again, which is a matchup he said he wanted to take on. And frankly, a matchup that's really intriguing on paper because one of the most responsible defensive fighters with really great sound tactics and who's very difficult to submit. That's been proven in Volkanovski against one of the most prolific offensive fighters in the history of the UFC, who's a very big guy at 155 in Charles Oliveira. So fantastic. But yeah, to the point of Andrew in the chat, he says Ilya has a big following. Absolutely, he does. Part of the reason that I thought Yair as well was being groomed for success, he's been around for a long time. He's been around since the tough Latin America days, and he attracts a different audience for the UFC that they're trying to continue to attract. And when you look at the soccer players coming to watch Ilia Topuria, when you look at the fact that the UFC is doing a lot of relationship building in Spain, it does tell you they want to give this guy a big chance and a big opportunity. And I don't think that happens from an interim title shot. As cool as it would be, I think they would do Holloway and Topuria if we see Volk go up and weight here. But I do think that what we're probably going to see instead is a little bit more of the standard play here. I think it's going to be Volk and Topuria at 145 pounds, and I think we're going to see Charles take on Islam at 155 to figure out what's next.
Yeah, so my second question will be, how do you think that fight between Volk and Topuria will go? Because for me, it's a very hard one to break down, honestly. I obviously have to do tape, but I know these fighters very well, and I can honestly see anything happening in that fight. I would not be surprised whether Topuria steps up and wins the belt. I honestly wouldn't. I would be surprised if Yair Rodriguez won, right? Even though I bet half a unit shot on him, I still would have been surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if Topuria wins the belt. Reason is because Volk's been hurt and dropped many times, and Topuria has extreme power in the hands. And not only that, he's going to wade into danger, right? He's going to walk forward. He's going to bite down on the gum shield. And we know he's going to throw with massive power. He's a great body puncher too, so he may catch Volk off guard, hit the body and hit the head. And on top of that, he has the grappling upside in this fight. I mean, he's an elite jiu-jitsu player, and he's very, very strong wrestler in all realms. I've seen him go for double legs, but I've also seen him go for Greco-Roman body lock takedowns and throw people by the arm and stuff. So I definitely think he has a good chance to win in all realms of the fight, which you don't see often. I mean, who has Volkanovski been going up against recently? There haven't been well-rounded guys, apart from maybe Max Holloway. But he's just a level above Max Holloway. He's just outsmarted him in 3 fights, right? So Yair Rodriguez, he had a massive takedown defense issue and a ground game issue. Islam Makhachev, he's got a massive striking issue, right? And even though he showed good striking in that fight, he's just a lot taller, a lot rangier. He still has an issue. That's a specialist, right? You speak about Brian Ortega. He's a specialist on the ground. Yeah, he's a tough guy, but he's a specialist on the ground. A lot of the fighters that Volkanovski's been fighting have not been really well-rounded guys, where I feel like Ilya presents a different skill set. He can win the fight in any range. Doesn't matter if he's long, middle, or clinch. He can win the fight in any range. So I think it's a very hard fight. But on top of that, I could see Volkanovski outpointing him from distance. I could see him just clowning him, honestly. I could see Ilya not understanding the dynamics of range control and distance control that Volkanovski does so well. Volkanovski's range control is amazing. I've probably never seen anything like it in MMA. And the guy doesn't even come from a traditional striking background. It's crazy, So I could see him just outclassing Ilya on the feet. So for me, I can't really say how the fight's going to go, but I'd like to hear your opinion if you have, I don't know. How do you think that fight will go?
Yeah, I think it's really tough to count out Ilya in any fight at 145. When you look at what his skill set is, it's very good, right? He's very dangerous on the feet. He packs a lot of power. I think his biggest liability, kind of like Volk, is his chin. He puts it on the line. He fights with a lot of bravado. These are the kind of things I think you need to beat Volk, though. And I had said a long time ago, I thought somebody like Josh Emmett or Yair Rodriguez, and this was like 2 years ago, I think, would be the best kind of people to look for to beat Volk. Because when you look at most guys, they're not going to have a chance to beat him because they're not going to hit him hard. They're not going to try and get in his face and really bring the fight to him. And I feel like that's what you need to do to bring the fight out of him. And perhaps that's what I overlooked about Yair. Yair likes to have space. He likes to have some opportunity, and Volk controls that range, that space very well. And when he started to lose control of that space, he picked his counter shot so well that Yair basically couldn't fight back anymore. And that's something that's rare to see from Yair, right? He's extremely durable, extremely tough. You can normally hit him with the side of a baseball bat and he's okay. But in this fight, he got put down hard. So Volk continues to show that when he is able to get after his offense, he's one of the most dangerous guys in the division, but he's susceptible at times to being hurt because he puts himself on the line to score with big offense, right? He's not afraid to fight. So when you look at Volk, he has the defense and the offense that makes him such a world-class fighter. That was the biggest difference on display as well over the weekend. There's no position where Volk is just defensively void, whereas Yair on the ground was making some decisions that leave him open to getting hit, leave him open to getting hurt. You know, he's going for the big elbows and stuff like that. There's a reason most people control posture. It's so they don't get beat up, right? And he got beat up and he let it happen and he took too much damage and eventually he paid the price on the feet for the damage that he had incurred on the ground, in my humble opinion. So I think that when you look at Ilya, going to be a lot harder to ground him. He's going to be a lot harder to get one clear advantage over like Yair was. And Yair's kicks led to that advantage position for Volk as well, which was tough. So ultimately, I felt like the ground game of Rodriguez was a little bit of a letdown here. And it had been showing signs of improvement, but Volk is just a level ahead. Ilya Topuria, you know, he hasn't had to show as much of his ground game, especially recently. Where exactly that stands is yet to be seen, but I would assume it's extremely high level because the last time we've seen it break him, like he was breaking it out and it looked high level before. And that was years ago, right? He's been mostly striking and knocking people the hell out in his last couple of fights. I think he can grapple. I think he can wrestle and present a lot of problems. So yeah, I'll probably be looking at another underdog situation. And I hate to say that, right? Because I just made a donation, right? But it's a theory play, right? It's something where if you're willing to get off every time, you're not going to win. But eventually you do get old. It doesn't matter who you are. And when you're 35 at featherweight and you're taking on 25-year-olds and 26-year-olds and 27-year-olds, eventually you're going to pay the price. So Volk's a gangster, but that's why I think for his career, 155 makes more sense. And he knows that. But I think for now, fighting these killers at 145, God bless him for it. What can you say? But he looked aces on Saturday and he has to be favored.
Yeah, he definitely will be favored, and I think a lot of people will be taking a shot on Ilya Topuria. It's one of those ones where, obviously, depending on where the line opens up, I do see a lot of people betting Ilya Topuria. So if you can get on an early line, I would assume that the market will go the other way. So it's probably beneficial to jump on an early line, obviously, depending on what they open them up. But, I mean, if Topuria gets like 200 range, I think that would shorten to like 160 come fight time or something. I know Volk's a legend, but I know a lot of people in the know, a lot of people with a lot of money would probably be betting on Ilya Topuria. From my humble opinion, without doing tape. Something I wanted to mention about Volk quickly before we go on to the next fight as well is that the way he manages ranges is amazing because he's a short guy, right? So like he's the shortest in his division, but he's a range fighter. This is unheard of in MMA, really. Yes, we have some beautiful range control masters like Israel Adesanya, like John Jones. These people are the tallest people in the division, with the biggest wingspan in their division, with the longest reach in their division. Volkanovski is the shortest fighter in every single one of his fights. And he still maintains range and plays the counter-striking game and controls distance. It's absolutely unbelievable. For someone like me who's a nerd about striking, it's crazy to see, honestly. But with that being said, man, we can move on. There's a lot of fights we can speak about, you know, and I don't want to speak about too many because I do want to have a little early look at the next card. But if we just see Tapology and put up here, like what a card, man. This card was just unbelievable. We had Pantoja versus Brandon Moreno. That fight was an absolute banger of a fight. I bet Pantoja there. I bet Pantoja money line. I got 2 units on him at plus 170. And I mean, I guess going into that fight, I made a passionate take on your podcast. And one of the things I said was that I'm not 100% ready to accept that Pantoja is just going to gas in this fight if he gets past round 1, right? And we saw that that was the case, right? So I felt vindicated in my opinion of that. I said that the only 2 times we've seen him death gas over the last 5 years has been against Brandon Royval and Askar Askarov. And I hypothesized that the reason he gassed was because those were heavy grappling fights. Now, I may be wrong because in this fight, this was kind of a heavy grappling fight as well. And he didn't gas. But I just wasn't ready to say that the guy's going to gas. I mean, the first time they fought, or I think it was the second time or the first time, when he rear naked choked him, the other fight, he 30-26'd him. He won a decision. He won a 15-minute decision and won 10-8 on I think all judges' scorecards, 1 round. So I understood that, like, I understood where people were coming from when they had the Pantoja's just going to gas out take, but I couldn't 100% agree with it. And I thought that if that wasn't true, then the line is completely inaccurate, right? So I capped Pantoja a favorite, but then I said, all right, with Brandon Moreno's improvements, his 5-round experience, which is way more than Pantoja. Pantoja never been 5 rounds. Brandon Moreno had been 5 rounds many times. And with his improvements, okay, let's say that Pantoja now goes from a favorite, skill set for skill set, to even, right? And then, okay, if the cardio dynamic is true, then maybe Moreno's a slight favorite. But even then, I don't think he should be that big of a favorite. But if the cardio dynamic is not true, well, then Pantoja's a favorite again. And if Pantoja's improved as much as Moreno, well, then Pantoja's a big favorite. So for me, the market was giving all the upside to the cardio dynamic for Moreno, to Moreno's improvements, and giving no upside to Pantoja's gas tank, giving no upside to Pantoja's improvements, and giving no upside to Pantoja's stylistic advantage and psychological advantage. He was 2-0 over this guy already. That's a psychological advantage going into a trilogy fight. And I think we saw all of those things come true. So I was very happy with that bet. One of my favorite cashes of the year, because I kind of went against a lot of people there. You know, I know some people got in at Pantoja plus 180, but the market had some resistance. Brandon Moreno blew out to a bigger favorite there. So, yeah, well, what did you think about that fight? Obviously, it was a great fight. I don't know if Pantoja impressed you at all. He definitely impressed me, but he's the champion now, man. So shout out to Pantoja. I can't wait to see what he does in the future.
Yeah, for sure, man. It was a great fight. My internet actually did cut out in and out during that fight. I was watching it outside in a pool with a couple buddies, having a great time. So admittedly got to get out and, readjust there. But it was a fight where overall I felt like the right guy won. I felt like I didn't really understand the scorecard that went the way of Moreno. Didn't have any action on the decision. I had a small play on Moreno by sub at plus 900. I felt like they were going to grapple a decent bit here. And, when he took his back in the second round, I must tell you, I was like, we did it. We did it again. And then, of course, Pantoja showed his class there, continued to work. And I felt like the damage he did to Moreno early slowed down Moreno down the stretch as well. And Moreno probably just has accumulated a little bit too much damage in too short a time. So probably time for some time off, I would think, for Brandon Moreno, at least for the time being. But I don't know. It's a tough pill to swallow for him. Certainly 3-0 is a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah, and like 3-0 on someone, there's a reason for that, I saw some people on Twitter and they was like, oh, like Moreno just didn't fight well or something. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, man. Pantoja's 3-0 over Brandon Moreno for a reason. He didn't mistakenly go 3-0 over him. Sometimes people just have your number. There's a reason Alexander Volkanovski won 3 times against Max Holloway, right? Even when he was down 2-0 and he managed to win the next 3 rounds. There's a reason for that. And there's a reason why Pantoja has beaten Moreno 3 times now. There's many reasons, but one of the reasons is because Pantoja has basically all the optic upside. Because although Moreno has a great chin, Pantoja has a better chin, which is crazy to say because Moreno has one of the best Mexican chins I've ever seen. But Pantoja has one of the best chins in general I've ever seen. Not Mexican or Brazilian, just best chins in general. I mean, we see him go 3 hard rounds with Figgy. Figgy beat the shit out of him. And his chin didn't wobble. Yeah, he maybe got dropped to one knee for a second. But what that means is that when they're swinging on the feet, the majority of the time, the big shots, the optical shots are going to land from Pantoja. So this is something in MMA betting people don't realize. If the fighter you're betting on has a great chin, not only does that benefit him because he can just take more shots and he's going to be in there the whole fight, he's going to have more chance to win the fight because he's still going to be there. But optically, he's going to look better to the judges, because when he gets hit with a big shot, his head's not going to snap back. He's not going to go wobbly. He's not going to do the stanky leg. Whereas we saw him hurt Moreno, drop Moreno a couple of times, wobble him to one knee a few times. But it didn't happen to Pantoja. So even though Moreno may have been landing bigger shots, may have been landing better shots, the judges are not going to see that taking place, because when Pantoja lands, Moreno's wobbling. When Moreno lands, Pantoja's fine. So that's a massive benefit that I see nobody speaking about when we're speaking about fighters with good chins. It helps optically, not just because they're not going to get knocked out, but also optically on the judges. If it goes to the scorecards, they don't look as damaged. You know, that happens many, many times where a fighter's landing better shots, cleaner shots, better mixed martial artist. But because the guy's just more physical and can take more punishment, it doesn't look like he's getting beat up, even though to the technical eye of me and you who know about striking, we can see he's landing the jab more. We can see he's pivoting to the left. But to these judges, one guy's wobbling every time he gets hit and the other guy's not. So that's a massive thing in this fight that caused him to win the fight. And obviously the grappling, he's always going to be a level above in the grappling. And that's actually what won him the fight. I scored it 4-1 to Pantoja. It would have been one of the worst robberies in UFC history if Brandon Moreno won that fight, in my opinion, especially with the stakes in the title fight and stuff. It wasn't close, that fight. So, yeah, man, I was definitely glad to be on Pantoja there. I think that the market was just wildly incorrect on that one as it played out. But I guess people were just banking on him to fade. And obviously he didn't do that. And then we had the Du Plessis fight. And like you said, man, this is the fight where we had Jewish Better, me and you, on the panel last week. And we all picked Dricus Du Plessis to win. I think we picked him outright. I'm not really sure, but we definitely all picked him to win. We definitely all picked him for a bet. I said that Dricus Du Plessis has a massive chance of a knockout here, which is what you get. And like you said, which is what you got. And like you said, a lot of people were on your YouTube comments talking shit. Oh my God, how are they picking Du Plessis? And I did get a lot of shit for that. You know, a few people messaged me saying, how can you pick Du Plessis? Like, the tape's insane. And I saw a couple comments on Twitter on your post when you called those YouTube trolls out. And you said, and a few of them said, DDP shouldn't have won, or like Whittaker should.
No, it said after the fact, they're like, the tape said that he based on the tape, like you shouldn't have bet it, like whatever. Like, and I'm just like, even after the fact, even after you win, people are like, nah, bro, you're still on the wrong side. Like,
yeah, insane. So the fight just happened. Du Plessis dominated him, destroyed him in round one, elbowed his face to fuck. Dominated him in another 30 seconds in round one. He might have got the finish. Could have been a 10-8. In round two, he dropped him with a jab, stayed super patient, basically completely destroyed him. Looked like a -400 favorite, looked like an 8 out of 10 favorite. And people are still saying that based on the tape, you shouldn't have bet him. Well, let me tell you something, whoever said that. Based on the tape, Robert Whittaker had been dropped about 5 times in the last 7 fights. And I'm not going to go and give my take on why Du Plessis would win. I already did that last week on your podcast. If they're listening to that and they still have something to say, there's no way we can ever get through to them. But there was clear indications on tape and at a macro level with stats and stuff that Robert Whittaker was going to lose this fight. That's why you bet on Du Plessis, and that's why I bet on Du Plessis, and that's why we made money. But honestly, I didn't see Du Plessis dominating as much as he did. I thought it would be one of those ones where it was going to be a barn burner. I thought Du Plessis would have great chances to finish. I thought Robert Whittaker would have great chances to finish. I thought Whittaker would be hitting them head kicks. I thought Whittaker could be bouncing, looking great. I thought Du Plessis might get a takedown. He might look good. Robert would reverse. I thought it was going to be a barn burner back and forth. And I thought there was going to be good value on plus 300 Du Plessis. That's not what happened. Du Plessis dominated that fight. The lines look like they should have been flipped, which we rarely say that in MMA when a favorite is -400, right? But honestly, Du Plessis looked about -400 in that fight. Whether that's just one iteration or not, in that iteration, he looked -400. So I was personally surprised at how good he looked, but I wasn't surprised one bit that he got the knockout. Of course, that's why I bet on him. And that's why I had a massive bet. My biggest bet of the night on the under 2.5 rounds in that spot. And I also bet Duplessis money line. So, I mean, I'm sure you're going to agree with me, but was you expecting to see Duplessis do that well? Was you shocked at how well he done? And if so, if you was shocked, do you think that it's more Rob faded and didn't show up in that fight? Or do you think Duplessis is just that guy and he's been underrated throughout his career and he finally showed out?
Oh, I mean, that's certainly going to be the excuse that they go to next, right? Which is Rob Whittaker sucks. Before the fight, right? There's no chance that this guy beats him. Now, Rob Whittaker sucks. He's washed. He didn't show up. It was a poor performance. Go back and rewatch the first 2.5 minutes, because I'll tell you what, I was not feeling good for the first 2.5 minutes. Rob Whittaker was looking like Rob Whittaker. He was doing Rob Whittaker things. He was dancing around him, touching him with the jab, stepping on his knee, doing all the things that he does. But Duplessis was moving. He was coming in and out of range. He was shelling up well, and he was avoiding most of the damage coming back at him. So while he was a little bit defensive early and a little bit tepid coming into range, he was trying to get some feelers from Whittaker to get the timing. Whittaker, for as good as he is a little bit meat and potatoes. He likes to do the same things every fight and switch stance and do it again and do it a little bit more and throw the head kick and throw the jabs. And so eventually, when you have enough tape out there, people are going to start to make reads on the things that have landed on you before, on the things that they could do to hurt you. And for Duplessis, it's clear in the aftermath that that's what he was doing. But I felt like what we saw from Duplessis in the lead up was that he's extremely dangerous on the counter. He's dangerous on the lead. He could take people down. He does not have traditional wrestling. And when you look at what we saw in that fight, right? People were telling me there's no way he's going to take him down. Rob Whittaker is such a better wrestler. I said I thought Duplessis could out-grapple him. I thought he could club and sub him. Right. And people were saying there was no chance. If he wanted that club and sub at the end, he'd take it. Right. Rob was done. The fight was over. If he wanted his neck, he took his neck. It's over. So as far as I'm concerned, he dominated him in every facet of the fight. When Rob took it to the ground, Duplessis went for a guillotine. He got back to his feet using the threat of the guillotine. That's what the guillotine's there for. It's not there for you to get stuck on your back for the permanence of the round. It's there for you to create a threat, create space, create a dynamic where your opponent wants to pull away from you. Because when they pull away from you, you have space to stand up. And that's what he did. He got back to his feet. Then what did he do? He took him down with that stepping outside trip, and he slammed him. The side headlock, right? But there's a difference between a sag headlock, which is what we see a lot of times in WMMA, where somebody grabs a hold of a headlock and just kind of sits to it, which is asking somebody to take your back. And then there's a very hard stepping throw where he landed with a lot of impact. And the thing that people missed is he tried to roll up to an underhook, and he used the whizzer down position to go knee on belly and drop a few elbows. Dude, that's just good grappling. Like, the modern grappling meta is that you have to use the guillotine, the overhooks, all of it in tandem to control people on the mat. It's a great way to pass against elite guys, especially. So I felt like he showed a modern mixed martial arts game, and he completely outclassed him. So to be honest with you, it was a great fight. It was a coming out party for Duplessis, but we're seeing similar lines against Adesanya. Let them keep doubting him. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I honestly do think that's a much harder fight for Duplessis. There's a reason I bet Duplessis against Robert Whittaker. I think that's the first time I've ever bet Duplessis money line. And why not? I mean, he's been a favorite in every single one of his UFC fights, and now he's a plus 300 dog. It was a very, very easy bet for me, right? It's one of the easiest bets I've ever made. It was instantly plus 300. The market lines up. Robert Whittaker gets hurt every fight. DDP has an insane power and finishing ability. This is like the perfect storm for a bet. Now, I wish I would have went bigger on it. There's a reason why I didn't, because I really, really like the under 2.5 rounds, and I played that earlier for a full 3 units. So I didn't want to double up. There's a such thing as overexposure in MMA. And I know everybody looks at betting differently and everybody has different strategies, and that's fine. I have some colleagues who they say that they treat every bet singularly, completely separate of themselves. I don't do that. If I'm betting in the same fight, I actually like to not overexpose. If Robert Whittaker wins a decision, which he's done every single fight against somebody not named Adesanya in the last 5 years, then I not only lose my DDP bet, but I also lose my inside the distance bet, right? And so I didn't want to overexpose. But point being, this was a very easy bet to make for me. But the Adesanya bet, it won't be an easy bet to make. Obviously, it's dictated by the line. I'm going to see what the market says, but I think Adesanya poses a hell of a lot more danger to DDP than Robert Whittaker does. Adesanya hasn't been rocked in 5 out of 7 fights. Adesanya people haven't really competed with him, outside of obviously Alex Pereira. And I guess people, you could say Jared Cannonier and stuff was a close fight, but I know striking. And I know a lot of people thought, oh, those were close fights and stuff against Whittaker. He was a level above the whole time. Adesanya didn't push because he didn't need to. He was in complete control of every single one of those fights, whether they're close or not. Now, in MMA, you can be in control of a fight and still lose because the judges are, they're a little bit wonky-eyed sometimes. So I understand that. But he was clearly in control of all of those fights, basically, whereas Whittaker wasn't, right? So it's not going to be an easy fight. I think Adesanya clowns him on the feet. But one thing I will say is that Adesanya looked more angry than I've ever seen him. It looked like Du Plessis was fully in his head. We saw that post-fight face-off. I wasn't expecting to see Adesanya like that. Adesanya's usually the one laughing. Adesanya's usually the one chill. Du Plessis was looking at him laughing, thinking, I'm in your head. I'm going to fight you soon for the belt. So that can play, when you're speaking at the upper echelons of the sport, right? The mental aspect is sometimes more important than the physical aspect. Maybe Adesanya's a better striker. Maybe he's got better takedown defense and he can keep the fight on the feet. But if his mindset is not all there, if he goes in angry, if he goes in agitated, he could lose that fight simply on that. But I will say that I think Adesanya is such an elite guy mentally, an elite competitor, that I do think that even if he is angry, he's still going to fight the same. There's somebody who I'm blanking on now, but it may be John Jones or somebody else, another champion. It's like, sometimes they're angry, sometimes they're happy. It doesn't matter. They're just going to perform either way. Maybe Khabib Nurmagomedov, right? Khabib. That guy was absolutely furious against Conor McGregor, right? And he fought the exact same way as he's ever fought. He fought cautious, in fact, in that fight at times. So I think there are some fighters that it doesn't matter what you do to them. Maybe they do look angry pre-fight. They're still going to go in there and do their thing. And I do think Adesanya is cut from that cloth, but that remains to be seen. So that's going to be a good fight either way. I'm definitely looking forward to that fight. And the last thing I want to touch on, I just want to give a little shout out to the toughest man in the world, Dan the Hangman Hooker, because Dan Hooker broke Jalen Turner in this fight after Jalen Turner actually broke his orbital and his arm. So Jalen Turner breaks Dan Hooker's arm. He breaks Dan Hooker's orbital, and then Dan Hooker breaks his will later in the fight, which is insane. It's absolutely insane. Not only did he win the fight, but he broke him. He broke him, right? And I just want to give a shout out to Dan Hooker. I don't know if you want to say anything about that fight, but I just think he deserves a shout out because the guy was a plus 220 underdog, plus 230, whatever he was. And the way he just came through the fire in that fight, it was legitimately an insane thing to see live. I don't know if you want to say anything about Dan, but the guy's obviously made of different stuff.
Oh, just an absolute soldier of fortune. I didn't think he'd be able to take all the damage that he did. He did it again. I didn't bet the fight because I thought the line was a little bit disrespectful, but also just felt like I couldn't get there because Jalen Turner's made me 17 units in the UFC. Just had to give my man his respects and leave my hands off this one. And absolutely unbelievable performance from Hooker. Thought it was over in round two. I thought I could have turned off the screen, go back to what I was doing, the conversation I was having, and all of a sudden Dan Hooker just refused to lose. And sometimes you see that from people. And, it felt like he was fighting for his career in some ways too, his relevance in the division certainly. And he prevented somebody who's very talented from closing the door on him. So God bless him for it.
Yeah, fully agree. And this Tyra fight, interesting fight. Tyra continues to dominate his opponents while being extremely sloppy. It's funny because I said this on your podcast last week. I said it's very strange to see someone so high level at a specific discipline or with specific concepts in a specific discipline, but also be very sloppy at the same time. We don't see it too often. Usually, you got a very good striker. He's sloppy with the jiu-jitsu. You got a very good jiu-jitsu practitioner. He's sloppy on the feet. But Tyra, he's got very good jiu-jitsu. We know that. He can control position well. He usually reverses. But he's so sloppy on the mat. He's so sloppy. He gets caught in submissions all the time. He gets reversed all the time against non-grapplers. I mean, Chairez had him in. I know the guy was just kind of Hail Mary guillotine, and it doesn't matter, man. Like at some point you're gonna get caught. If you get caught in deep guillotines consistently over your UFC career, which Tyra has been caught in many now, doesn't matter if the guy's just ass pulling a guillotine, you're gonna get caught at some point. You know what I mean? It's gonna go wrong. He's gonna cinch it up too well. The guy's gonna have too strong of a grip. Yeah, like something's gonna happen. You're gonna get tapped out. So it's just strange to see Tyra, and this is what me and Jewish kind of come to the conclusion with last week, is that he's just a young guy, right? He still has to shore up he's 23 years old. He's sloppy on the mat, but he's elite on the mat at the same time. It's quite interesting. His offensive aspect of the game is very good. You know, I remember he sat down to that triangle, which was very good. Chairez did end up getting out of it, but he loves that triangle. The way he cinches it up is so slick. You know, he stitches it up really well. And I know you're a Tyra guy yourself. How did you rate that performance? Because I don't think he really covered -1,000. I don't think he looked that good in that fight. But then again, he kind of dominated all 3 rounds. So you might have looked at it a bit different than me.
To be honest with you, despite Tyra being one of my favorite fighters, man, I was on the road and I missed this fight. So I have to go back and rewatch it. You know, I had heard that it went to decision and he didn't look good and all these things. And so honestly, I just have to give it my own rewatch. But to your point, you know, this is a guy who turned 23 in January, right? Like he's a guy who's still extremely young. He also has only been training with other UFC level pros for the last couple of years, you know, and in bits and pieces. When he comes to the US, he gets training camps in Vegas, whatever. He does some work with the guys in Florida. He had posted pictures with Chepe Mariscal a couple months back. But also, I think that we have to give some context to the fact that this guy's went to decision twice in the UFC. Twice it's been on short notice on a fight that was rebooked. So it's like when you see this guy who's clearly pretty big for the weight and young, he's cutting down in weight. Maybe he doesn't do it the most professionally, right? Like maybe he wants to still eat a cheeseburger or something like people his age would do, like other wrestlers I knew that were still high level, but were, you know, 20 some odd years of age, right? And still do stupid things. So I feel like for me, I can forgive some mistakes. I can forgive some things that he can clean up along the way, right? When people were talking about, you know, this guy's crazy, talking about fighting ranked fighters, no way he could beat ranked fighters. I was like, I think that I would predict him to still beat somebody like Matt Schnell today. So like, not to say that he can't or is a guarantee to beat these guys, but just like, I think people will read too much into this result one way or the other. I feel like for me, what we've seen is a guy that has a really good skill set that he still needs to get more time in the octagon. The UFC is not born yesterday either. So who have they put him in there with? Guys that are tough, right? Guys that aren't going to give him anything for free. Guys that aren't just going to go in there and lay down and say, oh no, the mythical Japanese -1,000, I better go give up my arm in the first round. But they're also getting him time in the octagon. He needs experience. He's 23 years of age. How many times have we seen a guy who looks good take a huge step up, get beat to an absolute pulp, Chase Hooper, guys like this, and then maybe they don't look the same, or maybe we have to then send them all the way back down in their level of competition. Tyra shows a lot of promise. Let's not ruin it. Let's bring him along slowly, one step at a time, and I feel like he's still going to come up bases. I like him.
Yeah, I like him too. He's a really good fighter, and there's a reason I haven't bet against him in his UFC career. You know, I know a lot of people try to fade him. I do think that a lot of times his lines are too wide, but not wide enough for me to take the poke. We've got Anderson Silva here, though. Anderson Silva is actually a member of my service, one of the GOATs of MMA. So I'm happy to have Anderson Silva in my service. And he said we would have cashed so hard if Cledson had fought Tyra. So I actually did bet on Cledson Rodriguez there. It was +240, I think. And I bet against Tyra. And after seeing that fight, I was kind of upset that, you know, my +240 got cancelled. I do think that at some point, Tyra is going to be -500 against someone he should be -150 against. And that may be the time we pounce. He's 23 years old. I think in 5 or 6 years, if he continues, you know, grinding and keeping his head down, which we never know, but he seems like a good kid that he will do that, then maybe the 500s will be justified. But at the moment, I don't think they are. But at the end of the day, go on. Yes, Lou.
I had one quick thing, which was somebody had mentioned, and I did not fact check this myself, but that it was the last fight on his UFC contract as well. And when you're 23 years old, fighting for the fate of your contract, basically, like, that's a lot of pressure, right? So if you go out there, all it is about getting the win, making sure that you have some kind of leverage to go into negotiations with. Because if you lose and you're 23, the UFC could just shit can you and nobody cares. So I think that as far as I'm concerned, that was huge for his brand as well. Needed to win here, and maybe that's why when Clayton missed the weight, he's like, F no, I'm not taking it.
Yeah, Yeah, and that was a hard fight. You know, at the end of the day, it was a hard fight. But at the end of the day, like, Tyra looked good. You know, there was a few sloppy moments, but this is like every fight. It's weird. He looks really, really good outside of a few sloppy moments, you know, and then it's like, but those sloppy moments are bad. When I'm seeing him getting locked in full deep guillotines where he just has to wait until he's not escaping him. He's just waiting until the guy lets go because he's locked in so deep. He basically can't escape. You know, I think it might have been Chairez or someone. There's a lot of fights yesterday, but he went mounted guillotine on him. You know, he mounted it. It looked very tight. But Tyra also got a 10-8 in that fight. He dominated him, right? He took him down and he's elbowing him. And I actually called
I talked about the ground and pound. Nobody gives credit.
Yeah. I called the knockout or decision. I said, you cannot lay Tyra sub at -200. I said this on your podcast. I said, I like the knockout and I like the decision, but I don't know what one to go with, so I'm going to pass on them all. And the knockout looked plus 100 in round 2, and the decision looked plus 100 over the course of the 3 fights. So I'm upset I didn't cash on the decision there. I was leaning that a little bit more than the knockout, but it is what it is, man. Tyra is definitely a good fight. T-Banks is saying that the thing about Tyra is he just seems to never lose composure, even when he gets into trouble. He's so patient, and that speaks a lot to who he is at 23. That's only going to improve as he gets older. You know, someone so young being so patient, it definitely goes a long way in MMA, man. But look, we'll move on to the next card now. And look, I'm only going to speak about this for 15 minutes or so because I haven't done too much tape, so I don't really know too much about it. But I'm going to bring it up now. And I don't know if there's any fight you've done tape on and you kind of want to give us some insight to. But if not, I can just ring off a random fight if you don't have one that you want to speak about from this card up on the screen right now.
Yeah, fire off with any fight, because for me, I'm going to do my first look actually later tonight. And I always go into that with trying not to bias myself with fresh tape. I try and go in with my impression of the fighters and how I would approach it from nothing, basically. And then from there, I develop my reads out. So I've done a little bit of baseline research, including writing down some percentages and who I thought would be the favorite in these fights. But outside of that, I have not done any formal specific research as part of my process. So yeah, excited to talk about any one of them that you want.
Yeah, so it's not a good looking card on paper. We've said that. We're coming off one of the best cards, in my opinion, in UFC history. Liam thinks I'm a little bit recency biased there, maybe, but I don't know, man. I love the card, but I had my coach round to my house to watch the card and one of my other mates, and he hasn't come round before, so it was a good experience, you know. Maybe it was just who I was with in the company rather than the actual card, because he was talking me through positions and stuff. It was quite funny to see him. One of my coaches from Russia, from Dagestan's got a big beard. He speaks like Khabib, and he's like, these guys, brother, these white belts, brother, and stuff like that. So it was really funny watching the card. So maybe, you know, that's getting a little bit misconstrued. But I say that to say this. We had one of the best cards in history, and now we're going on to one of the worst cards in history. So the UFC have like, we've done you a favor with UFC 290. Now do us a favor by giving us some ratings on this poor card. But I'm a gambler at the end of the day, and as long as I got fights to watch, I'm not going to complain. Being grateful is one of the secrets to life. So I'm definitely still grateful for this card, whether it's low level or not. And there are some decent fights. I'm definitely looking forward to Gennaro Valdez fight. I mean, everyone looks forward to this guy fight. You know, he fights like an absolute maniac. I don't know how he went to decision in his last fight, but with that being said, he did do that. Melsik Bagdasaryan. I know he got beat by Josh last time out, but that guy could be a decent prospect. He seems to have massive gaps in the wrestling. And Terrence McKinney, that guy's always fun, apart from his last fight. I don't know what happened to him there. So, like, there's definitely some interesting fighters on this card. Let's speak about Melsik for a second, because I think Melsik's a good striker, but he definitely has massive deficiencies in the ground. And I know a lot of people are betting Melsik here. Melsik's up at about -200, if not more, right? But Tucker Lutz is a grappler. He is going to go for the grappling. He is going to try and take down Melsik Bagdasaryan here. So I don't know if you know too much about these fighters, Liam. They've only had like 1 or 2 fights in the UFC now. I think 2 fights each, but maybe a couple more. But a lot of people are on Melsik, right? But I think that this could be, I mean, Tucker Lutz could get a couple takedowns here. The thing about this fight is I don't really know how good Tucker Lutz is in the wrestling and in the top time department. I think he gasses a little bit as well, which is kind of a negative that I have for Melsik Bagdasaryan, because Melsik gasses in some fights as well. So when I'm fading Melsik, I want someone who's going to be pushing the pace consistently for 3 rounds, because I know that if Melsik doesn't knock him out, which he has a huge chance to do to anyone, then he may fade himself. Because I have seen Melsik fade a couple of times in the UFC now, especially when the grappling has been involved, right? And the last time, in his last fight, as soon as the grappling got involved, he got submitted instantly, which is never a good look. Now we know that people can get caught in certain positions. You know, he turtled up for like 1 second. Josh took his back, and it was beautiful the way he took his back and locked in that rear naked choke. But it's still not a great look when you already have grappling deficiencies. We know that the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu is your negative department, and then you get submitted in less than 5 seconds just because the guy took your back instantly. That's never a good look, right? But on the other hand, I don't know if Tucker Lutz has the takedown offense, the wrestling, or the gas tank to expose some of these deficiencies in Melsik Bagdasaryan. So I guess Melsik is a deserved favorite, but I honestly would be looking at the Tucker Lutz side a lot more than laying minus 220 over Melsik Bagdasaryan, who just lost his last fight, who's 31 years of age. I know he's like the upcoming fighter who everyone thinks, but he's older than Tucker Lutz in this fight. So I'll probably be looking at a Tucker Lutz spot. When I go into tape later tonight, I will be looking, does Tucker, and anybody watching tape, this is what I think you should be doing. I'm going to be looking at, does Tucker Lutz have the offensive wrestling to hold Melsik down? And does he have the gas tank to continue doing it, to push a pace, to make Melsik gas out? If I get a 1 out of 2 of those things a tick, then I'm probably going to take the shot on Tucker Lutz depending on the line. So what's your early thoughts on this fight, Liam? Do you see it playing out any specific way?
Yeah, I think that I'll probably be on a dog or pass situation here. The reason being, I have bet Tucker Lutz in the past against Pat Sabatini, and I think that Pat Sabatini beat him because he is a better grappler at the end of the day. And I think that the reason Daniel Pineda beat him is because he's a better grappler as well. And Tucker Lutz is not the most dynamic grappler in the world. So he's probably not a guy who's going to hop on your back and change the fight in an instant. But I do think that he's more of a lay and pray guy, right? I have in my notes the Sherrard Blackledge fight. I mean, he basically just tried to take him down and lay on him, as much as he possibly could. But when it was on the feet, he showed some core competencies, basic striking approach, meat and potatoes, but doing some damage to the body, mixing up his targets, and doing just enough that he could mix in his level change, get the takedowns. And I feel like against Melsik here, you know, he's going to have to be durable. He's going to have to probably take a lot of heavy firepower in the early going. But Melsik is a guy with a lot of muscle mass. He's a guy that throws a lot into his shots. And so as fights get extended, he tends to slow down pretty significantly, in my view. And he's fought a pretty soft level of opposition as well, if my memory serves, James. I believe that he fought, what's his name? Colin Anglin, guy who did not fare very well at the UFC level. Who else did Melsik fight on this run?
So I've got it up here.
Yep, Kulabau. And, you know, I think Brito would have been a really dangerous matchup for him. I would have taken Brito there. Kulabau, you know, I told people that people slept on Kulabau, right? I bet Kulabau when he fought to a draw against Charles Jourdain. So I've been thinking that Kulabau was an underrated fighter overall, but I thought that was a tough fight for him because I was like, man, Melsik's going to hit him really hard. And the fact that Melsik blew that fight, I feel like is a bad look for him. Bruno Souza, kind of a fraudulent win. Colin Anglin, not a great win. Dennis Bazooka, good enough win, but like Dennis Bazooka is definitely coming on. But right now, today, Dennis Bazooka is a way better fighter than he was when he fought him in 2020. So I think all that's something to keep in mind. He's not been very active, hasn't been in a lot of prove it spots. You got a younger guy with more experience in Tucker Lutz. I'm seeing that plus 175 and thinking to myself, it's probably a better dog spot than a favorite spot based on what we know about these guys.
Yeah, so me and you are in agreement here. Obviously, tape study is what we do, right? So tape study can always differentiate our opinions. But me and Liam are very well versed in the game. We know both fighters quite well. We know most fighters on most cards quite well. And as I get more and more involved in this game, as I spend more and more time in this game, I should say, my pre-tape opinions, they line up with my post-tape opinions more and more. When I first started in this game, Liam, it would be like, I'd have an opinion on a fight, I'd go into tape, and my opinion would completely reverse 180. But I'm talking like 7 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Nowadays, I'd say 80% of the time, my pre-tape opinion is just confirmed by tape because I know the fighters so well. I know myself so well. I know my betting strategy. I know what I look for in tape. So oftentimes, whatever I say pre-tape is what happens post-tape, but not all the time. And this game is all about getting small margins over the bookies. So even though I might be right 8 out of 10 times, tape is still extremely important because those 2 out of 10 times could make me win, lose, or break even, right? So tape is extremely important. And also, tape determines your bet size as well, right? So I think tape is so important in this game because, yes, maybe I think Tucker Lutz is the spot on this card. It's dog or pass. But I don't know if I want to bet him. I just think he's the side. I don't know how much I want to bet him, even if I knew I wanted to bet him. But when I watch tape, I'm like, okay, this isn't, now I know what I line him. He's minus 200. Now I should bet 4 units because I should do a big bet. So tape is extremely important. I don't want to say to anybody out there watching that you shouldn't do tape, or I don't want to downplay its importance, even for someone like me. Most people haven't been betting specifically on MMA and no other sport, unless I get tips from other people I know in the know, for 6-7 years. Most people haven't been doing that, right? So most people, you're going to have to watch tape for 5 years to even understand the sport anyway. But even then, someone like me who's been watching tape for so long, I still watch tape consistently. So yeah, with that being said, we will see, but I am looking to a Tucker Lutz play, if anything. And I've got a decent read on these guys, right? So this was a bad bet. I bet on Colin Anglin. As a bad bet, I'm going to admit it. It was just a level difference, right? I think stylistically, Colin Anglin had some problems for Melsick, but there's a level difference. And this is another thing I'm going to drop, another jewel I'm going to drop for anybody listening. You might go into tape and you might see that, like I did, Colin Anglin has the wrestling to take Melsick down and he has the cardio to push. That's a big stylistic advantage for Colin Anglin, but he's just not that good. He's not good of a mixed martial artist, right? So there's a level difference. So like you could get someone who's going to wrestle consistently, a great wrestler, but they fight Israel Adesanya. And although Israel Adesanya can be wrestled and will be wrestled at some point in his career if he doesn't retire, and has been wrestled by the likes of Marvin Vettori and Jan Blachowicz in the fight that he lost, because the level difference is so much, he's just a much better mixed martial artist. He's a much better fighter. The level difference is too big on one aspect of the game. The level difference in the fight IQ is much better. The game plan and the mindset, everything, you're still going to lose, even if the stylistic advantages go against you. You could have someone who's lower volume, who has a worse chin, who's not as good in the striking, but they're levels above in the wrestling, and they're just going to win because of the level difference. So that's what happened here. Colin Anglin was a level below Melsick. But other than that, I bet on Joshua Culibao. And you could say that Melsick still should be a favorite if they had a rematch, right? Obviously, I got Joshua as a slight underdog there, plus 110, I think. They went off around evens, it says here on Tapology. But I thought that if the fight goes to the grappling, Joshua's going to dominate. And what happened? The fight went to the grappling, Joshua dominated, right? I also thought that Joshua is going to have a tough first round, but he's going to push the pace and come through in round 2 and round 3. He had a tough first round, but he still did come through into round 2 and round 3. And I think if that got into round 3, Melsick would have been blowing out his ass. Now, I think, am I back, Liam?
You're back, brother.
Yeah, so what I was saying was, I think I've had a decent read on these fighters so far, right? Obviously, that was a bad bet against Anglin. I did bet on Daniel Pineda, and more so on the Tucker Lutz side. I bet on Daniel Pineda at like a plus 250 underdog, which was an insane line there. I mean, he was minus 250 favorite. I don't understand how they gave us Pineda at plus 250 there. I mean, the experience difference, the level difference in the grappling, like you said, was just insane. Pineda basically dominated the fight. I was this close to betting Pat Sabatini at evens, this close, and I decided to pass, and we saw what happened there. So I think I have a decent read on these guys, and I will be looking at a Tucker Lutz play. We'll see what tape says. Someone in the chat as well, MMA Jesus, he said that JDM has just been lined up with this guy right here, which is true. I pulled it up before the fight because I wanted to speak before the podcast because I wanted to speak about it. So Jack Della Maddalena, according to Ariel Helwani, will be fighting on this card. So it goes from the worst card of the year to probably the worst card of the year because they're injecting it with Jack Della Maddalena, which is obviously a great addition. He's fighting Basil Hafiz. I don't know anything about this guy, Liam. We did speak about him a little bit before the podcast. His record it's all right. I mean, he's fought some UFC level guys. Like you said, he had the split decision loss against Evan Cutts and he won a knockout in round 3 there. So, it's good that he avenged that loss. He went to a split decision with Anthony Ivy. Anthony Ivy, former UFC fighter, not UFC level guy. So split decision isn't great. The one thing on his record that looks pretty good was back in 2017, he went to a draw with Jeremiah Wells, who's a very good fighter, in my opinion, very dangerous MMA fighter and very tough to beat. So that's going to be interesting. I don't know anything about this Basil guy, and I know you don't either, so we won't bore the viewers with talking about that one. Maybe we'll speak about 1 or 2 more fights, Liam, just quickly, and then we'll jump off. And one of the fights I want to speak about, I guess we should just speak about the main event just to get out of the way. This is a bad main event. I'm not interested in this main event, to be honest, at all. Holly Holm versus Maribena Silva. A lot of people I know are on Holly Holm. It seems like the whole world is on Holly Holm. A lot of sharp guys I know are on Holly Holm. I don't think I can do it at this stage in her career, Liam. I know that she had a win in her last fight. I know she looked all right in her last fight against Yana Santos, but I mean, that's Yana Santos. You know what I mean? Like, Yana Santos is not a great fighter. We just seen her kind of shit the bed in her fight recently. Holly's a good fighter, but I don't know, man. I think one of these days she's going to lose as a decent size favorite. I think she's like minus 150 at the moment. I'm finding it really hard. I'm struggling to speak about this fight even more than I'm struggling to bet on this fight. And I'm really struggling to bet on this fight. I do think that Buena Silva has some submission upside that Holly Holm maybe hasn't seen before. I mean, who has Holly Holm fought in terms of grapplers with submission upside? Has she fought anyone, Liam? I know Ketlin Vieira had her in a sub, but I mean, Ketlin's not like a great jiu-jitsu player who's subbing girls.
Can I tell you the God's honest truth, James? I had 0.6 or no, excuse me, I'm on the wrong page. Excuse me. I had 1.18 units on Ketlin Vieira via sub plus 850 against Holly Holm. Can you effing believe that? Had her in a choker, face turned 50 shades of purple, and she didn't tap because she's a gangster. But I did think that Ketlin Vieira was going to win that fight. I did bet 6 units at plus 210. So one of my bigger bets on WMMA ever. And for me, to your point, right? Like Holly Holm's old, right? She's just a very, very old fighter. She's clearly, excuse me, on a lot of supplementation, if you ask me, right? She looks like better than she did physically at 30, and she's, like 40 now. So she does a lot of things right, but also, I think that people are a little too bullish on her, like getting back to title shots again. Does anybody give a shit about that at this stage of the game? Like, is anybody buzzed about this card? Is anybody getting super fired up? I mean, for me, I'm not. Personally, I think that it's fine. Excited to talk about fights every week. Excited to get into it. Excited to try and make money. But yeah, I think fading Holly Holm with Brazilian chicks probably plus EV long term. I don't think that her grappling is all that good. I think it's very okay. I think it's very average. I think she's good at out physicaling girls that stink. She's done that her whole career. I thought that the Aldana win, after seeing Aldana do the same thing against Amanda, actually takes a little bit away from it as well, where she just like wilted against nothing, where it wasn't even, the pressure hadn't been applied yet. She just was already ready to check out of the fight in a big moment, in a big opportunity. I felt like getting a second crack at it would change that. It did not. Right. So for me, that takes away a little bit from her only good win in the last few years, which is that Aldana win. The Pennington win was nip tuck. The Yana Santos win doesn't tell me nothing. So for me, everybody bitched and moaned and complained that she deserved that Ketlin Vieira fight. I mean, go back and rewatch it. In the clinch, Ketlin Vieira landed meaningful shots, I felt like, and Holly Holm did a lot of stomping the feet and things that don't matter. And so when it all came down to it, the things that the judges had to look at was the fact that Holly Holm, when they were at distance, was getting hit with harder shots by a younger girl. And on top of that, when they were in close, she almost got her head popped off. Like, it literally almost got her neck ripped apart. Like, I just felt like, these Brazilian chicks that are younger, that know how to grapple are going to give her a lot of problems, especially early. The cardio dynamic is real. So I think that's where her clinch breaks have always been a selling point. Ask Ronda Rousey. She got highlight reeled because of it. So she does a good job at breaking the initial grasp of an upper body takedown attempt. But I think if Mayra Buena Silva has a brain here, she's going to come out here with shoes and headgear and try and take this girl down and make a name for herself. She's got a couple quick submissions. Yo, Stephanie Egger is a better grappler than Holly Holm. Like, no doubt about it. Zero doubt. So
is Gillian Robertson, you know?
Yeah, I would say there's probably more along the way as well. So, yeah, for sure.
And I know this is down at flyweight, right? But at the end of the day, I mean, when do you really see a woman with this many, not even inside the distance, but this many submission finishes on her record? She's been doing this since her first fight ever. You know what I mean? Look at this armbar, ninja choke. I don't think I've ever seen a ninja choke on a women's record ever. You know what I mean? The ninja choke, that shit is tight.
Romaine Durandamy got Juliana Pena.
Was that a ninja choke?
I don't even know if they called it that, but that's definitely what it was. Yeah, they called it a guillotine, but she ninja choked her.
She just grabbed her neck and just grabbed onto anything she could, right? Put her hand on her back and game over. But like what I'm trying to say is this is an elite inside the distance submission record. I know maybe they're not the best names, but actually they're not bad names.
Egger competed at ADCCs. Jillian Robertson is a black belt. Like she has real wins here. Yep.
Armbar against Gillian Robertson. Like not a lot of people submit Gillian Robertson, man. Mara Barella, she beat Tyler Santos. I'm pretty sure this chick beat Tyler Santos one day. I know that that was probably a one-off, but still armbar there. She finished Stephanie Egger. Lena Landsberg, okay, she was done, but you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like Holly Holm's grappling is not good. She was a boxer, then she became like a kickboxer in MMA. She gets takedowns, but I don't think her jiu-jitsu is good. I don't think Holly Holm has good jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? I think if you put her in the gi or even no gi and send her out to whatever competition, I don't think she does well. From what I've seen in MMA, she does not do well grappling unless she's on top and just dominating and just bullying. And this chick is very, very, very tough. Yeah. And she's very physical. Mayra Buena Silva is physical. I know she got thrown about a little bit by Montala de la Rosa. I need to rewatch that fight again, but I don't know, man. A lot of people, I'm just making the case on the other side because a lot of people are on Holly Holm this week. A lot of people. And maybe I'm wrong because a lot of people who are on Holly Holm, I respect them. But for me, I'll be looking at a submission, Liam. So I don't know.
How does Holm win her fights these days, James? Can you answer me that? It's pretty straightforward in my view. She grapples every time, right? She holds you against the fence. You want to do that against somebody that really knows jiu-jitsu for the whole time when you almost got your head popped off by Ketlin Vieira?
Yeah. And
seems interesting.
I never watched that Ketlin Vieira fight, and I actually bet Holly Holm there, and that's quite a disappointing bet that I make. I think I bet her like -200. And my reasoning going into that fight was the only way, because I watched a lot of tape on that fight, and I thought the only way she loses this fight is if she's done. I think stylistically, she wins the fight all day easily, right? And maybe I was right about that. Maybe I was wrong about that. I do think she's done in general, and that's why I'm making the case for Silva right now, right? But I didn't see the lead up to the choke. I don't know if you remember the exact sequence, but I'm interested to know whether she got reversed or she got taken down. Do you remember how she got put in that rear naked choke there?
It was standing. That's what I remember for sure is she had her in like a standing rear naked choke exchange because the one thing about Ketlin is she actually has like a judo black belt, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, and she wrestled in Brazil. So it's like she does have all of her grappling chops, but how many times have we seen her cost herself UFC fights by not focusing on fighting enough and just focusing on grappling? Like think of the Yana Santos fight where she blew that fight by just giving up damage late in the rounds, right? But I feel like what she did in that fight well was control Holly Holm, muscle her against the fence, like dominate some of the clinches where Holly normally does that. And then when they were in those positions, trying to remember, hit her to the body, do some things that'll sap her energy. And when they were at space, she just landed with so much more authority. I feel like she actually got the choke after landing pretty big on Holly at distance. I think Holly tried to close the gap on her, grab a hold of her, and it didn't work, right? Because she was against a more physical Brazilian girl. And I think that Bueno Silva doesn't have the same judo and the same kind of pedigree, I don't think. But I think if Holly gets on top of her, she's in danger. So that's what makes it more interesting for me.
Yeah, and if she did rock her before cinching up that stand-in rear naked, we know that Silva has a lot of power, man. If she has one thing, she has finishing ability, not only on the ground but on the feet. She's drop girls. She's got a lot of power in her hands, and she could definitely crack Holly here and then cinch up a sub. So yeah, I guess me and Liam again, we're kind of leaning on the dog side. Maybe that's just our style in general, but at this point in her career, at 41 years of age, I mean, yeah, I don't know, man. Obviously, I'm going to watch tape, and from what I've been told, because I've gone back and forth with a few people, and from what I've been told, I'm wrong. And once I watch tape, I'm going to change my opinion. So, that's neither here or there, I guess. But when I do watch tape, I'm going to come on and do a show later in the week, and I'll actually break down either the full card or the main card or some of the fights, whatever. And I'm going to give my post-tape opinions because, as I say, every now and then, 20% of the time, if not, they do differentiate. So I'm going to specifically be looking at this fight because everything I'm thinking pre-tape, I'm being told by people I respect that I'm wrong, except for a few people for the most part. So yeah, man. Look, man, I guess we can jump off now. It's been good chatting. Let me just have one more look at the card and see if there's anything we want to speak about. Look, I'm just going to do it for this guy here because someone keeps saying that we need to speak about this Dudakova fight because apparently they put $2,000 on Dudakova and they've been asking us all stream to speak about it. So let's do that. So honestly, I do not know much about this Dudakova girl. I remember her last time out. Let me see who said it. Do you want to kick this one off?
Sure thing. I mean, I don't know the most about these girls. I remember Dudakova coming through the Contender Series. I believe she was a pretty significant dog. I want to say a plus 250 if my memory serves. Let me just double check that. Yeah, about a plus 220 at close against Maria Silva. And Maria Silva came in with some hype, 9-1 now as a prospect, got back on the winning track, had a win over Catherine Paprocki on the Contender Series, but was boring, right? So then Dana was like, no, get a little bit more fun, get a little bit more exciting, take some more risks, and then we'll take you back, try again. Tried again, didn't end up working out. She loses there to Dudakova. So I felt like coming into that fight, I expected Maria Silva to kind of be the A side there. Now they're giving her another Brazilian girl, and Estela Nunes has clearly struggled in the UFC, but we also saw that, she kind of laid out the blueprint for Gomes, right? When Gomes went out there, she put hands on Waregi. And how did we know that Waregi could be a little bit vulnerable there? She got dropped by Estela Nunes, right? So Estela Nunes, the problem for her has been consistency over 15 minutes. That's clearly demonstrated by her resume in the UFC. But also you look at that Angela Lee fight. She got submitted in the second round there. She's been submitted in the third round in the UFC by Ariane Carnelossi, who's more of a brawler and a physical specimen than, a technical fighter. So I felt like that was more of just breaking down over time, getting beat up, breaking right in her UFC debut. No problem. Give you a break. Sam Hughes, a little bit, more manageable task, but still talented fighter, girl who has some championship level experience outside the UFC, takes the loss there in a close one. Okay. Can understand that. She's working with the Nunes team, right? She's working with American Top Team in South Florida, as best I understand. So Estela Nunes, you'd expect, is getting better. And you'd have to think that Dudakova is the least experienced fighter that she's fought in the UFC. So for those reasons, I could understand why there will be some love that comes in here. Let me see what I had in my notes. I had Dudakova. So what I try and do is I try and guess what the line will be, not just like what I think the line is, for me, because that I'll do after research, but like I try and predict where the market's going to be from the start. So ironically, I actually had Melsick 70%. It was my guess for where the market would price it. That's where they have it. I would think that the value would be on the Lutz side. For this fight, I looked at the price or I looked at the matchup and I said to myself, I think Dudakova will be somewhere between 65 and 70%. In this case, she's over that, right? She's probably closer to 75%. So for me, it'd probably be looking at slight value on the Nunes side here based on my initial cap as well. But when I look at somebody that doesn't have great cardio, I do always say to myself, the ABC say always bet on cardio, right? And Dudakova just showed she could fight for 15 minutes, albeit against an unproven fighter on Contender Series. So this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. Is anybody 75% in a UFC debut at this stage of their career in WMMA? I mean, you got to really ask yourself some questions there. But why did I think she should be favored? Why did I expect the market would favor her? I think she has takedown upside, and I think she has better cardio. So when you look at those two factors, I mean, that's a great way to win a WMMA fight. But we also know memeish finishes happen, right? Estela Nunes has some power, so she's going to come in with some finishing equity, which is important for WMMA. This is one where I'm going to have to do more research. I don't have a strong take here, but that was my kind of impression, was that the market maybe would be a little bit too bullish, as they often are in Contender Series products. Because, guys, even if Dudakova is the next big thing, how often do we see top prospects underperform in a UFC debut? It happens all the time. So just something to keep in the back of our minds here, where Dudakova could come out and, win 5 fights in the UFC in her next 7, but this could not be one of them. So just something to keep in the back of our mind. At minus 300, she's being priced aggressively here.
Yeah, I agree, man. I'm not going to rehash too much of what you said, man. But with that being said, bro, thanks for coming on. This has been a good chat. We went 1 hour 20. I knew we'd go longer than I thought we would go, but that's what happens because I like to rant. Sometimes you like to rant. So I hope it made for a good stream for everybody, though, Liam. Liam's got his own show coming later, early look. So how many hours from now until you're going to do that one, roughly?
25 minutes.
Let's go. All right. So you can just stay on YouTube, maybe go get yourself a bite to eat or something, depending on where you are in the world. It might be dinner. It might be breakfast. I don't know. There's a lot of time zones out there. And in 25 minutes, Liam's going to go onto his channel. So everybody go over to Liam Picks Fights channel. He's going to do his show right now. And yeah, thanks everybody for coming on and joining in. I think we peaked at about 70 live viewers, 72 or something, which is solid for this impromptu show. I didn't do any promo for this show. So yeah, maybe we'll make a habit of this. I do want to do recaps a lot because recaps are quite fun for me. And I like to, just go over my bets and go over the actual, see if the market was right or not in the gambling sense. So I might continue to do these recaps. But yeah, shout out to everybody here. As I always say, if there's no viewers, there will be no chat. So shout out to the viewers, shout out to the chat. And Liam, do you have any departing words for me or the viewers before we kick out of here?
Yeah, man, I'll just say it's always a blast. Thank you very much for having me on. Thank you for coming on the show last week. I thought we did a great job breaking down the fights. If you guys enjoy nerdy, in-depth breakdowns where we talk through the fights and really try and dig into the substance of it, the gambling theory, a lot of the stuff that you come to expect from our guy Lucrative here. It's why he's a friend of my show as well, trying to bring you guys great information. I always try and bring my best original analysis to the table each and every week. See where the chips fall. And we're currently riding a 3-event winning streak. If our guy Dan Argueta got the tap the clean way, it'd be 4 weeks in a row. So just trying to keep riding the momentum, my man. You know how it is. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low. Never get too high one way or the other, and just keep the ball rolling. So it's been good tidings, and hopefully we keep it going at this crappy card.
Yeah, that's it, man. Crappy card, but hopefully we get more than crappy earnings. And that's what it is in gambling. It's just riding the waves, man. A lot of people are not cut out for gambling, and that's just what it is. I get messages from people saying, I bet 20 units instead of 2 units like you told me to. And there's always going to be people out there who cannot control their emotions within gambling. But I think, especially as a man in life in general, it's very important to have emotional control. And there's no better way to practice emotional control than being a gambler, because it's very hard to control your emotions when you're winning and losing, not just losing. So yeah, with that being said, make sure you control your emotions if you want to be a good gambler. And Liam, thanks again for coming on. Thanks to the chat. I will be back in a few days. Liam will be back in 25 minutes. Good luck on your bets.